It started with a single email, a harmless note about one of my designs. But what I didn't know then was that this email would unravel everything I thought I knew about trust, friendship, and justice. My name is Claire Bennett, and if there's one thing people know about me, it's that I give everything my all. As a graphic designer at Crestwood Marketing, I've built a reputation for being creative, dependable, and someone who can turn even the messiest ideas into something beautiful. It's not just my job, it's how I express myself. Every logo, every campaign banner, every social media post feels like an extension of who I am. And honestly, I love it. But let me tell you, working in a place like Crestwood isn't always sunshine and rainbows. The agency thrives on competition, cutthroat, relentless competition. Collaboration often feels more like a battlefield than teamwork. Deadlines loom over us like storm clouds, and egos clash daily. Still, despite the chaos, I've managed to carve out a space for myself here. A space where I feel valued, or at least, that's what I believed until recently. And then there's Rachel Carter. If you met her, you'd think she walked straight out of some glossy magazine ad. Confident, sharp-witted, and effortlessly charming. From the moment we were assigned to work together on a major client pitch last year, we clicked instantly. Late-night brainstorming sessions turned into inside jokes. Shared frustrations about office politics became bonding moments. And before long, Rachel wasn't just my coworker. She was my closest friend here. I trusted her completely. Maybe too much. She knew things about me no one else did. The insecurities I carried about my work, the struggles I faced balancing ambition with self-doubt, even the tiny details of my personal life. I never questioned whether I could confide in her because, well, why would I? Rachel had always been supportive, cheering me on when I landed big projects or offering advice when things got tough. But looking back now, I realized there were signs. Small ones, easy to dismiss at the time. Like the meeting last month when Rachel casually mentioned coming up with a concept during our brainstorming session. The same concept I had pitched privately to her just days earlier. Or the way she'd sometimes interrupt me mid-sentence in presentations, subtly rephrasing my ideas as though they were hers. Back then, I told myself it was nothing. Just misunderstandings, coincidences. Looking back, those little moments weren't accidents. They were warnings I refused to see. The first real crack in my blind trust came a few weeks ago. I was sitting at my desk, sipping lukewarm coffee while scrolling through emails, when something caught my eye. It was a message from Rachel, forwarded to our team lead, praising a design mock-up attached to the thread. Except that mock-up was mine, not hers. At first, I thought it must be a mistake. People mix things up all the time, right? So I sent Rachel a quick chat. Hey, just FYI, that design you mentioned in your email, I actually created it. Did you mean to credit yourself? Her response came almost immediately. Oh wow, Claire, I'm so sorry. Totally slipped my mind that was yours. You know how hectic things get around here. Let me clarify with the team. That should have been the end of it. Problem solved, apology accepted. Except something about her tone felt off. Too casual, too rehearsed. Later that day, I overheard her laughing with another coworker in the break room. You wouldn't believe how clueless some people are, she said, her voice light but laced with something sharper underneath. My stomach tightened. Was she talking about me? By the time I returned to my desk, the doubt had already taken root. And deep down I knew I couldn't ignore it anymore. Because if Rachel could take credit for something as small as a design mock-up, what else was she capable of? As I stared at my computer screen, a notification popped up, a new email from Rachel. The subject line read, "Let's grab lunch tomorrow." For a split second, I considered deleting it without responding. But curiosity, and maybe a sliver of hope that I was wrong, got the better of me. I typed 2 words before hitting send. Sure, why not? What I didn't know yet was that lunch would change everything. The cafe was bustling when Rachel and I met for lunch the next day. She breezed in wearing a sleek blazer, her hair perfectly styled, and flashed me one of those smiles that used to make me feel like everything would be okay. "Sorry, I'm late," she said, sliding into the booth across from me. "You wouldn't believe how insane things have been at work." I forced a smile, even though my stomach churned with unease. "No worries. I've been there." For the first few minutes, we made small talk about deadlines, mutual coworkers, the weather. But beneath the surface-level chatter, something felt off. Rachel's usual warmth seemed rehearsed, her laughter just a fraction too loud. Still, I told myself I was overthinking it. Maybe she really had forgotten about crediting me for the design mock-up. People make mistakes, right? Then she leaned forward, lowering her voice conspiratorially. "Listen, Claire, I need your help with something." My guard went up immediately. "What is it?" "There's this client pitch coming up," she began, twirling a strand of hair around her finger. "And I've got this idea. It's kind of rough, but I think it could really wow them. Thing is, I'm not great at fleshing out visuals. You're so much better at that than I am." Her words hit me like a punch to the chest. That rough idea wasn't hers, it was mine. An idea I'd pitched to her privately during our last brainstorming session. I stared at her, trying to process what was happening. Was she seriously doing this again? Right here, right now? "Rachel," I said slowly, "that sounds an awful lot like the concept I shared with you last week." Her expression didn't falter. Instead, she tilted her head, feigning confusion. "Really? Huh. Weird coincidence, huh? I swear, I came up with it on my own. Guess great minds think alike." Great minds? My hands clenched under the table, nails digging into my palms. Coincidence? No way. This was deliberate. But before I could press further, she changed the subject, steering the conversation toward weekend plans and other trivialities. By the time we parted ways, I was seething and more convinced than ever that something wasn't right. Underscore. Things only got worse from there. Over the next few days, I noticed patterns I couldn't ignore. Emails I'd sent to Rachel disappeared from shared folders without explanation. Clients praised projects I hadn't even been credited for leading. And then came the whispers, hushed conversations among coworkers that stopped whenever I walked by. One afternoon, as I passed the break room, I caught snippets of dialogue through the partially open door. "Yeah, heard she's difficult to work with," someone muttered. "She doesn't play well with others," another voice chimed in. My heart sank. Where were these rumors coming from? Who would say such things about me? It didn't take long to connect the dots. Rachel. Every interaction between us became tinged with tension. In meetings, she'd interrupt me mid-sentence, subtly undermining my contributions. When I confronted her after one particularly egregious incident, she smiled sweetly and said, "Claire, you're being overly sensitive. No one's trying to steal your ideas. They're just excited about collaborating." Collaborating. The word tasted bitter in my mind. Doubt crept in, gnawing at my confidence. Was I imagining all this? Had I misread every situation? Rachel's gaslighting was relentless, chipping away at my self-assurance until I started second-guessing everything I did. And then came the major blow, the thing that shattered whatever fragile trust one still clung to. I arrived at work one morning to find my boss waiting for me outside my cubicle. His face was grim as he gestured for me to follow him into his office. "We need to talk," he said once the door closed behind us. He slid a printout across the desk toward me. My blood ran cold as I scanned the page. Fake screenshots of private messages allegedly sent by me stared back at me. Messages filled with complaints about clients, snarky comments about colleagues, accusations of incompetence. None of them were real, but they looked damning enough to destroy anyone's reputation. "This isn't who I am," I stammered. panic rising in my throat. "I want to believe you, Claire," my boss replied, his tone heavy with disappointment. "But this has reached upper management. Until we sort this out, consider yourself on probation." Probation. The word echoed in my ears like a death sentence. As I left his office, tears threatening to spill down my cheeks, I spotted Rachel chatting casually with a group of coworkers. She glanced up, meeting my gaze for a split second. Her lips curled into the faintest smirk before she turned away. That smirk told me everything I needed to know. All my hard work, all those sleepless nights, it meant nothing now. Worse still, I couldn't figure out why Rachel would do this to me. Was jealousy really worth destroying someone over? By the end of the day, I sat alone at my desk, staring blankly at my computer screen. A single thought consumed me. How far is she willing to go? Because if Rachel thought she could get away with this, she was dead wrong. And I intended to prove it. But how? As I scrolled through old project files later that night, searching for answers, I stumbled upon something strange. Timestamps didn't align. Certain phrases sounded eerily familiar, as if lifted directly from my own writing style. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, trembling slightly. If Rachel thought she could erase me, she'd underestimated one thing. I always leave a trail. But unraveling the truth wouldn't be easy. Not when every step forward felt like walking through quicksand. And as I clicked open yet another deleted email thread, I realized I wasn't just fighting for my job anymore. I was fighting for my dignity. And Rachel Carter was going to regret crossing me. That night, I stayed late at the office, long after everyone else had gone home. The hum of fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as I sat alone in my cubicle, scrolling through years' worth of project files. My heart raced with a mix of anger and desperation. If Rachel thought she could erase me so easily, she'd underestimated one thing. I always leave a trail. It started small. A timestamp on an email chain didn't match up with when Rachel claimed she'd sent it. Then there were phrases, little turns of phrase that felt eerily familiar. They weren't just similar to how I wrote. They were how I wrote. It was like looking into a distorted mirror where everything reflected back at me, but slightly off. I opened another deleted file, this one buried deep in a shared drive folder neither of us had touched in months. As I read through it, my stomach tightened. This wasn't just plagiarism, it was theft. Entire paragraphs of text lifted directly from my drafts, reworded just enough to seem different if you weren't paying attention. But I was paying attention now. My hands trembled as I saved screenshots of the evidence onto a personal USB drive. One discovery led to another, each piece fitting together like a puzzle that painted a picture far uglier than I'd imagined. By midnight, I'd uncovered more than stolen ideas. I found traces of something even darker. Rachel hadn't stopped at taking credit for my work. Hidden within expense reports were irregularities. Small amounts of money funneled out of company accounts and into what appeared to be personal ones. At first glance, they looked like routine reimbursements or minor accounting errors. But when I cross-referenced them with timestamps and attached receipts, the truth became undeniable. Rachel had been embezzling funds for months, maybe longer. The realization hit me like a freight train. She wasn't just ambitious or jealous. She was dangerous, calculating, willing to burn anyone who got in her way, including me. By the next morning, I knew I couldn't do this alone. I needed help, but not just anyone. I needed someone discreet, trustworthy, and skilled enough to dig deeper without raising suspicion. That's when I remembered Ethan, one of the IT guys. We'd worked together briefly on a tech issue last year, and he'd struck me as sharp and observant. More importantly, he hated office politics almost as much as I did. I caught him during his lunch break, pulling him aside under the pretense of needing advice about software glitches. "Hey, Ethan," I said, keeping my tone casual. "Got a sec? I've been having trouble retrieving some old files, and I think it might be related to permission settings." He raised an eyebrow but nodded. "Sure, let's take a look." As we walked back to my desk, I handed him the USB drive. Actually, can you check these too? There are a few documents I need to recover, but they're locked behind some weird encryption. Ethan plugged the drive into his laptop, his brow furrowing as he scanned the contents. These look suspicious, he muttered after a moment. They should, I said, quietly leaning closer. They belong to Rachel Carter. His eyes widened, and he glanced around to make sure no one was listening. You sure about this? I'm positive, I replied, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. But I need proof. Something concrete. For a second, Ethan hesitated, weighing the risks. Finally, he nodded. All right, let me see what I can find. As the days passed, I threw myself into gathering every scrap of evidence I could. I recorded conversations using voice memos, capturing Rachel's subtle jabs and manipulative comments whenever she tried to undermine me. I retraced our interactions, piecing together a timeline that exposed her lies. But the more I dug, the lonelier I felt. Coworkers avoided eye contact with me in the hallways. Conversations stopped abruptly when I entered a room. Even people I'd considered friends seemed reluctant to engage, their fear of Rachel outweighing any loyalty they once had toward me. One afternoon, I overheard two designers whispering near the coffee machine. Did you hear about Claire? One of them murmured. Apparently she's losing it, accusing Rachel of all sorts of stuff. She's probably just bitter, the other replied with a shrug. Rachel's been here longer. Why would she risk her reputation over something like that? Their words stung, but they also fueled my resolve. If Rachel wanted to turn everyone against me, fine. Let her believe she'd won. Because while she was busy playing puppet master, I was cutting the strings. The turning point came late one evening, weeks into my investigation. Ethan called me into his office, closing the door behind us. His expression was grim as he slid a printed report across the desk. You were right, he said quietly. Rachel's been doctoring emails, forging documents, and funneling money out of the company. And that's not all. He pointed to a section of the report. She leaked those fake messages herself, used a dummy account to make it look like they came from you. My breath caught in my throat as I stared at the evidence. Every lie, every betrayal, it was all right there in black and white. She's going down, I whispered, my voice trembling with a mixture of rage and triumph. Ethan gave me a cautious look. What are you planning to do? I met his gaze, my jaw set. Whatever it takes. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, surrounded by papers and screenshots. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a flicker of hope. Rachel had underestimated me, and now I had everything I needed to expose her. But exposing her wouldn't be enough. No, this wasn't just about clearing my name anymore. This was about making sure she never hurt anyone else again. As I plotted my next move, one question kept circling in my mind. How far was I willing to go? Because if Rachel thought she could destroy me, she'd forgotten one crucial detail. I wasn't afraid of fighting dirty anymore. And the best part? She had no idea what was coming. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table, surrounded by evidence, emails, screenshots, financial records, all meticulously organized into folders labeled with dates and names. The weight of what I was about to do pressed down on me like a storm cloud. But beneath it, something else burned. Determination. The first step was subtle. Anonymous whispers in the dark corners of the office where no one could trace them back to me. I started small, dropping hints to people who mattered most, the ones Rachel had manipulated or wronged without realizing it. Have you noticed how Rachel always seems to know exactly what upper management wants before they even ask? I typed into a group chat under an anonymous alias, almost like she's reading their minds, or maybe just accessing information she shouldn't. Within hours, replies poured in. Some dismissed it as paranoia, but others weren't so quick to brush it off. She does seem unusually involved. One coworker replied cautiously. And what about those expense reports? I added later. attaching a heavily redacted screenshot showing irregularities in company funds. Funny how some of those reimbursements end up funding personal purchases. It was risky planting these seeds, but I knew it would work. People were already suspicious of Rachel. They just needed proof to validate their doubts. And soon enough, they'd have more than they bargained for. By the end of the week, the atmosphere at Crestwood Marketing shifted subtly. Conversations around the water cooler carried new undertones of skepticism. Rachel, oblivious to the growing tension, continued strutting through the office like she owned the place. She laughed too loudly during meetings, interrupted colleagues mid-sentence, and basked in praise from higher-ups who still believed her act. Watching her, I felt a cold satisfaction settle over me. Let her enjoy her spotlight while it lasted. It wouldn't shine much longer. But behind closed doors, I worked tirelessly to ensure every detail of my plan was flawless. I created a presentation, a damning dossier of Rachel's crimes. Each slide told a story. Stolen ideas, forged emails, embezzled funds. I even included audio clips Ethan helped me recover, snippets of conversations where Rachel admitted to unethical behavior. By the time I finished, there wasn't a single loophole left for her to exploit. Still, doubt crept in late at night when the adrenaline faded and exhaustion took its place. Was I becoming someone I didn't recognize? Someone capable of tearing another person apart? I thought about Rachel, not the polished professional everyone saw, but the woman who'd once laughed with me over bad coffee and shared frustrations about impossible deadlines. Had she always been this way, or had something changed her? Did any of that matter anymore? One evening, as I stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror, I asked myself the hardest question of all. Was revenge worth it? The answer came slowly, rising like smoke from the ashes of my anger. It wasn't about revenge, not entirely. It was about reclaiming what she'd tried to take from me. My dignity, my reputation, my voice. It was about protecting others from falling prey to her manipulation. Justice wasn't just punishment, it was prevention. With that clarity came resolve. I couldn't let fear stop me now. Not when I'd come this far. Timing was everything. I scheduled a private meeting with our boss, framing it as an urgent discussion about project updates. But I timed it strategically for the day of a critical board meeting where Rachel would be presenting a major campaign pitch. If everything went according to plan, she'd walk into the room expecting applause and walk out facing ruin. On the morning of the meeting, I arrived early, clutching my laptop and a folder filled with printed copies of my presentation. My heart pounded as I sat up in the conference room, arranging each piece of evidence with clinical precision. When our boss walked in, his expression was neutral, curious even. He gestured for me to begin, unaware of the bombshell I was about to drop. "This isn't easy to share," I started, my voice steady despite the tremor threatening to break through. "But it's necessary. What I'm about to show you proves beyond a doubt that Rachel Carter has been stealing ideas, forging documents, and embezzling company funds for months." His eyes widened as I clicked through the slides, each revelation hitting harder than the last. When I played the audio clips, his face paled. "We need to handle this carefully," he said finally, his tone grave. "If what you're saying is true, we can't let her present today." I nodded, relief flooding through me, but only briefly, because as much as I wanted to believe this was over, I knew the real confrontation was yet to come. At exactly 10:30 a.m., Rachel entered the boardroom, confident and smiling, ready to dazzle the executives with her pitch. Our boss called the meeting to order, then gestured for me to speak. All eyes turned to me as I stood, my heart hammering in my chest. For a moment, Rachel looked confused, then amused, as if this were some sort of joke. "Rachel," I began, my voice ringing clear across the silent room, "there's something you need to see." Her smile faltered as I connected my laptop to the projector. The first slide appeared on the screen, a time-stamped email chain showing her plagiarism of my designs. "What is this?" she demanded, her voice sharp. "Claire, what are you doing?" I didn't respond. Instead, I clicked to the next slide, financial records detailing her embezzlement. Then the audio clips. Then screenshots of the fake messages she'd leaked to sabotage me. The room fell silent except for the faint hum of the projector. Rachel's face drained of color as realization dawned. You can't prove any of this," she stammered, glancing desperately at the executives. "Oh, but I can," I replied, holding up the folder of printed evidence. "And I will." For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt powerful, victorious. But as Rachel's gaze locked onto mine, burning with hatred, I realized something unsettling. She wasn't defeated yet. Not completely. The air in the boardroom was suffocating, thick with tension as I clicked through slide after slide of irrefutable evidence. Each revelation hit like a thunderclap, reverberating through the stunned silence that had fallen over the room. Rachel stood frozen at the front of the table, her polished facade cracking under the weight of exposure. "This is absurd," she finally spat, forcing a brittle laugh. "Claire's jealous. She's trying to sabotage me because she can't handle seeing someone else succeed." Her words hung in the air, defiant but hollow. Even she couldn't mask the tremor beneath her tone. The executives exchanged uneasy glances, their expressions shifting from skepticism to disbelief, and then something darker, betrayal. I didn't flinch. Instead, I hit play on one of the audio clips Ethan had recovered. Rachel's voice filled the room, sharp and calculating. "If we tweak Claire's design just enough, no one will notice it's not original. Besides, she won't say anything. She's too afraid of rocking the boat." Gasps rippled through the room. One executive leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "Is this real?" he asked, his gaze flicking between me and Rachel. "It's authentic," I replied calmly, meeting his eyes. "Every piece of evidence here has been verified." Rachel's face twisted in panic. She turned to our boss, pleading now. "You can't seriously believe this. It's hearsay. Manipulated files. Claire's out for revenge." But the cracks were widening. Her usual charm dissolved into desperation as I projected the next slide, a detailed breakdown of the embezzled funds, complete with timestamps and forged receipts. "You stole from the company," I said, my voice cutting through her protests like steel. "And you framed me to cover your tracks. Did you really think you'd get away with it?" For a moment, she seemed to shrink, her shoulders slumping as if the full magnitude of her actions had finally caught up with her. Then, almost instinctively, she rallied, pointing an accusatory finger at me. "She set this up." Rachel shouted, her voice shrill. "She's obsessed with ruining me. Ask anyone, she's unstable." Her attempt to shift blame fell flat. Around the table, co-workers who had once doubted me now avoided her gaze altogether. Some looked disgusted. Others simply stared at the damning evidence on the screen, unable to reconcile the woman they thought they knew with the monster standing before them. Our boss stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "Enough," he said firmly, his voice carrying authority that brooked no argument. "We'll launch a full investigation immediately. Until then, Rachel, you're suspended pending further review." Her knees buckled slightly, though she managed to stay upright. For the first time since I'd met her, Rachel Carter looked utterly defeated. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "Please, this isn't fair." But fairness wasn't hers to claim anymore. As the room erupted into murmurs, I felt a strange mix of emotions swirling inside me. Triumph, relief, anger, and yes, even pity. Pity for the woman who had destroyed so much to gain so little. Rachel's hands trembled as she reached for her bag, fumbling with the zipper. Her movements were frantic, uncoordinated, as if she were trying to escape not just the room, but the consequences closing in around her. Before she could leave, however, I stepped forward, blocking her path. "You wanted everyone to see who I am," I said quietly, my voice steady despite the storm still raging within me. "Now they know exactly who you are. Her eyes locked onto mine, blazing with hatred and humiliation. For a split second, I thought she might lash out, but instead, she shoved past me, nearly knocking over a chair in her haste to flee. The door slammed shut behind her, leaving the room eerily quiet. No one spoke for several moments, the gravity of what had just unfolded settling over us all. Then, slowly, our boss broke the silence. "Claire, thank you for bringing this to light. We'll ensure justice is served." Justice. The word echoed in my mind, hollow yet heavy. Was this truly justice? Or was it merely retribution wrapped in professionalism? As I gathered my things, preparing to leave the room, I noticed something on the conference table. A single printed email, left behind by Rachel in her haste. Curious, I picked it up, scanning its contents quickly. My blood ran cold. It wasn't addressed to anyone at Crestwood Marketing. Instead, it was a draft message to someone outside the company, a name I didn't recognize. And the subject line sent chills down my spine. Contingency plan. The fallout was swift and merciless. By the end of the day, Rachel's suspension had turned into termination. Our boss called an emergency staff meeting, his tone grave as he announced that she'd been fired, not just for plagiarism or embezzlement, but for betraying the trust of everyone at Crestwood Marketing. She abused her position, he said firmly, and in doing so, she compromised not only herself, but the integrity of this company. Effective immediately, Rachel Carter is banned from any future employment within our industry. The room erupted in murmurs, a mix of shock and vindication rippling through the crowd. I sat quietly in the back, watching as the weight of his words settled over my coworkers. Some looked relieved. Others exchanged guilty glances, likely remembering times they doubted me during Rachel's smear campaign. As people filed out of the conference room, a few approached me hesitantly. "I'm sorry, we didn't believe you sooner," one designer admitted, her voice tinged with regret. "Thank you for standing up to her," another added. "We've all seen glimpses of what she was capable of, but no one wanted to confront it." Their apologies felt hollow, yet oddly validating. For weeks, I'd carried the burden of Rachel's lies alone. Now, finally, the truth was out and justice was being served. Word spread quickly beyond the office walls. Within days, whispers about Rachel's downfall reached every corner of the industry. Social media lit up with speculation, former colleagues sharing stories of her manipulative behavior. Clients who had once praised her work distanced themselves publicly, eager to avoid association with scandal. By the time the dust settled, Rachel's professional reputation was in ruins. She disappeared from the scene entirely, leaving behind only rumors and broken relationships. For me, life began to rebuild itself piece by piece. Promotions followed, first a senior designer role, then lead creative strategist. Accolades poured in from clients and executives alike, praising my dedication and resilience. But more importantly, I found something far greater than accolades: clarity. I learned to trust my instincts again, to listen to that quiet voice inside me that had warned me about Rachel long before I acted on it. I realized how much energy I'd wasted doubting myself, questioning whether I deserved respect or success. Rachel's betrayal forced me to confront those insecurities and ultimately to overcome them. Late one evening, as I packed up my things after another long day, I caught sight of my reflection in the glass doors of the office. The woman staring back at me looked different somehow. Stronger, sure. Gone was the uncertainty that had plagued me for months. In its place stood someone who knew her worth and wasn't afraid to fight for it. Sometimes life forces you to fight battles you never wanted. But through those fights, you discover strengths you didn't know you had. And sometimes justice doesn't come from waiting. It comes from taking action. Still, there were moments when the scars of everything that had happened resurfaced. Like the night I stumbled across Rachel's name online while researching a new client. Curiosity got the better of me, and I clicked on the link, a social media profile filled with bitter rants and thinly veiled accusations directed at me. You think you've won, Claire. One post read, venom dripping from every word. This isn't over. It sent a shiver down my spine, a reminder that even though Rachel was gone, the damage she'd caused lingered. But instead of fear, I felt resolve. If she thought she could intimidate me now, after everything, she was wrong. Betrayal can break you, or it can make you stronger. Karma may take its time, but when you give it a little push, the results can be extraordinary. And as I closed my laptop that night, shutting out her toxic presence once and for all, I reminded myself of something important. I wasn't the same person I'd been before Rachel tried to destroy me. I was better. If you were in my shoes, what would you have done differently? Let me know in the comments.